You're listening to Inside the Notes. I'm your host, Erica Block. Here we have the opportunity to listen to the stories that connect our musical family tree. First-hand accounts of performances, musicians, and mentors that shape the way we listen, learn, and teach. On today's episode, we welcome Montreal Symphony Orchestra and Bellingham Festival of Music concertmaster Richard Roberts. Last night, Richard gave a hauntingly beautiful performance of Vaughan Williams' The Lark Ascending. Is that a piece that you've played a lot in your career?
I've played it maybe half a dozen times, this being the sixth.
Wow.
So, and mostly for sad occasions. Mm-hmm. So it's not always been, it's a very haunting, as you say, mm-hmm. and introspective piece. Mm-hmm, but
very
it's very beautiful, meditative. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
I loved how just the collective sound of the orchestra plus this sad violin line, it creates this calm in the audience, and they really were so focused on you and the tone that the orchestra was giving it. I think it was a beautiful start to a show to kind of set everybody's caliber down and get ready to listen. Is there solos that you love to play? Do you have favorites that?
Oh, this is a hard one because there are so many that I
Your
really
repertoire
love.
is incredible.
Well, I've had the good fortune to play a lot of solo and with my orchestra and with others that it would be difficult for me to really choose one thing or even one composer. That's the hardest question to answer is, who is your favorite composer? I can't say. One week it might be Bach, one week it might be Mozart or Rachmaninoff or you name it. So that's one of the reasons I love music and I can't do without it.
Right. There's just an endless palette.
Oh yeah. For sure.
How did you start playing the violin?
Oh, I was afraid you'd ask that.
I think these are the most fun questions.
Yeah, well, I would like to say that I started at the age of 3, and I became a child prodigy, as they might say, and made my first solo appearances with symphony orchestras when I was 10.
Wow.
But this would be a lie. I didn't. I started in 4th grade at public school, and only because we had a very small school, and in a small town, and in this school, they had several grades, sometimes 2, sometimes even 3 grades in one room.
Wow. And
in our class, from grade 1, was a beautiful young girl. Now, bear in mind, I don't know what I was thinking, but I was enamored of this girl. Kathleen was her name, and she played violin, but I didn't know this until 4th grade, and she brought her violin to our class, grades 4, 5, and 6, and she played for us, and I thought, that's it. That's my in. So I signed up for violin. And we had our lessons together for a year.
Oh my gosh.
And then she went to another school because she was a year older than I am. Then I was stuck with the violin, so I started to practice it more and got more interested in it. So
amazing.
That's the real story.
That's a fabulous story. It's better. So where did you grow up?
In Austin, Minnesota. I was born in West Virginia, but I grew up in Austin, Minnesota, which is in the southern part of...
And that's where you were studying.
Yep.
That's where you got your first lessons.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a great place.
Yeah.
That orchestra has so many incredible musicians.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so and then you went to Indiana, is that right?
Indiana University. I did my undergraduate work at Indiana University.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And there was so many great teachers there during that time.
Oh, fabulous. It was a frighteningly distinguished group of teachers that I was just amazed by on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
Really, I had Janos Starker was my chamber music teacher.
Wow.
William Primrose, the great violist, famous violist, was my chamber music teacher.
Wow.
Joseph Gingold, my principal violin teacher.
Incredible.
And so it was like heaven for me.
Yeah. Do you have any memories or golden nuggets that you heard from Gingold or Starker where in learning a piece, something that he said kind of sticks with you?
Plenty, but I don't recall them right now. But every lesson was he wouldn't let you go out the door unless you were a better violinist within 1 hour.
Wow.
And so that was his goal with each of his students, and he treated everybody differently. It wasn't a system
right.
whereby he taught students to be all the same.
Right.
He treated everybody individually, and for having 37 students, this is quite a bit.
Wow, 37 students.
Oh, yeah. He taught morning, noon, and night. He would eat his lunch in his studio. He would eat his supper many times in his studio.
Wow, that's incredible. That's so much mental power.
Oh, yeah, plenty.
Wow.
And
what were your lessons like with him? Like compared to when you were studying as a high school student and then becoming a college student, what was his plan for you?
Well, it was more intense, intense and intensive. He wanted us to learn not only the violin but the music for the violin, and the music composed for the violin. I mean by that, and so he focused on us becoming better violinists technically, but also musically, because he was such a warm person. He had a warm way of playing also. And so one of the net results was we ended up being better violinists, better musicians, and better human beings all at once. He also would drag out some books so that he could show us something about the music that we were playing, so that we would have some historical context to the studying. So
he seems to be, I feel like, one of the things that's harder and harder to grasp now as a music student from your teacher is this concept of he was there 40, 50 hours a week. So it was like a full-time mentorship.
Oh, yeah.
Constantly there, nurturing, helping. He's walking the halls. He's always there. And now you really hope to get your hour. And a lot of times you're not going to get your hour a week. You might get an hour every 3 weeks, and maybe it's a 2 hour. So happens. The incredible oversight of how they mentored you in that time period is so special and so unique. I feel that now we are losing that. So getting to go and have chamber music with these incredible icons, and then have this teacher who's there all the time. That's an amazing way to start.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Incredible.
And I ended up my last 2 years being his assistant to teaching. So then I got a different perspective. He asked me to keep an eye on certain students, and to me, they were wonderful violinists. How can I keep an eye on them? You got to be kidding. But I got he's teaching me how to teach.
Exactly,
also. So,
grooming you to be a teacher.
Yeah. So there's different aspects to it, and this similar thing with Janos Starker, my chamber music teacher. He asked me to teach his daughter at home, so I went to his home every week to teach his daughter, and from him also I learned how to teach, what you do when you teach, and he would come in once in a while and make suggestions, and so I was learning a lot besides just learning my instrument.
Wow, that's an incredible extra layer of that education. When you finished college, did you go straight into your job, or
I did.
You did?
Yeah, I did.
Amazing.
I started with the Minnesota Orchestra, and I was the last second violinist. And this was, to me, it was where I wanted to be because, it's a home. Yeah, it was. And I had auditioned unsuccessfully for 2 big orchestras. I was age 21, and I auditioned for Philadelphia and Cleveland and didn't get these jobs. And my mother wanted to know, why would you be interested in those orchestras after all? So she was glad I got this Minnesota position.
That's awesome. Amazing. And so from there, then Cleveland? Is that right?
No. Well, I went to study even because I was not used to. When you're in university, you're like a little bit like a thoroughbred. I had 7:30 classes in the morning for 3 years.
Right.
And I was used to going from 7:30 to practically midnight.
Absolutely. It's round the clock.
The way it is.
Yep.
And then I got my first job in Minnesota, and I asked for the schedule, and they said, well, you'll start at 10 o'clock in the morning. And I thought, what? 10 o'clock?
The day's half over.
And then, well, when do you finish then? Thinking maybe they finish at late, like 9 o'clock in the evening. No, we finish at 12:30. I thought, you've got to be kidding. I was used to do it. So I enrolled in school. Amazing. I took language courses. I even went for a summer in Geneva to study with Henrik Schering, the great celebrated violinist.
Amazing.
So I just couldn't stop going to school.
Absolutely.
So then my next job was in Toronto as associate concertmaster. I was interested in moving up.
Oh.
Ambitious young guy.
Yeah.
So I auditioned there, got the job, and I stayed for 2 years, and then went to Detroit for maybe the Detroit Symphony for maybe 6 months. And then the Cleveland job came around, so I auditioned for that, and I felt I got a lucky break because I didn't play particularly well for my audition, but they invited me to be assistant concertmaster there.
Amazing.
So that was a big one. I stayed there 8 years. Well, then the Montreal concertmaster job came open, and so I auditioned for that, got that. Now, one of my friends, who's now retired but was in the Chicago Symphony at the time, said this. He said, "I think Roberts is trying to work his way around the Great Lakes." Yes. And he's predicted my next job would be in Sandusky, Ohio. So,
get ready. Pack your bags.
Didn't work out that way. I'm now, this is my 37th year in Montreal.
Wow. Wow.
So it's the longest time I've held a job.
That's incredible. So that's a lot of victories. What, as you were going through, getting to these different jobs, what was the way that you attacked auditioning?
Well, I'll start with my very first audition, which was Philadelphia, and my teacher had been the editor of several excerpt books, 3 big volumes that I practiced. I mean, there were hundreds of them, hundreds of pieces to learn, so I practiced them all. I practically had them memorized, and my teacher coached me, and he thought it would be a good position for me in Philadelphia, and I went to the audition, and there were only 2 pieces on the stand. And what about all these excerpts that I practiced? I saw that one of them was Bartók Concerto for Orchestra, which was not in the excerpt books because at that time it was rental only.
Right.
And same with the other piece. The other piece was Hindemith, Matthijs der Maler. And that was also rental only. So it wasn't published for consumers.
Right.
So I did my best. But I was shell-shocked. I just didn't know what to make of it. I thought I played my solos well, which is always part of an audition, but these orchestral excerpts were a disaster. So that I was out of there very quickly. And then I went to Cleveland and auditioned there. I didn't get the job because they had 5 chairs stacked with 1 foot high of excerpt material, each one. So 5 of them, and they would just pick at random. So they didn't. Nowadays they have a list.
This is so different. Okay.
Yeah. Nowadays there's
I think
a
that's
list of
really
pieces.
Important. So you literally, when you got there, you just were sight reading.
Sight reading. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's
So
incredibly
that was,
different.
Again, I was absolutely shell shocked. I just couldn't believe, and I thought this is a nightmare. This audition thing.
Yeah.
And then I went to audition in Minnesota, my home state, and they gave me a list of pieces that they would like me to prepare for the audition. And I thought, this is cheating.
Yeah, this is too easy. I already know.
I don't want to, I'm not sure I want to be in an orchestra that cheats like this. So I prepared as they asked, and I played the audition, got the job. So that was all right. But I didn't know that any orchestras did that after my first 2 experiences. So then we came to the third one, and then
Did
after
Cleveland
that,
have a list?
Again, the second time I went to second time, no, they still didn't have a list. They just pulled up, but I had more experience. Then.
Right.
I had been in Minnesota Orchestra for 3 years, Toronto for 2 years, Detroit for 6 months. So I'd played a lot of pieces. So I was ready to take the audition. So, but nowadays there's a list for practically every orchestra, I think, that you
Absolutely.
but you're still expected to master that list.
Right.
You can't just come in and it's like your sight reading. That's a different skill set.
Exactly.
So
what do you think? I mean, those 2 styles of auditioning are completely different skill sets. One is complete mastery, and the other is the ability to fly by the seat of your pants and sight read like crazy.
Yeah.
Are we completely... I mean, now everybody knows all the work. Mm-hmm. Everybody's played all the work. Yeah. Would it be? I feel like it would be interesting to kind of just pull it out of the hat and
it's
make
still
people...
done. I mean, they always at the end of these lists they have a sentence saying sight reading may be asked. Mm-hmm. So it's always possible. And in our orchestra, of course, many times we do ask for sight reading. Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah. So it's not only to determine what experience you've had, but how well you can adapt quickly to situations. So that's important too. They're two different skill sets, but you can combine them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's
and so often
possible.
there's so little rehearsal time.
Right.
And you're getting so much repertoire that you don't have 6 months to sit there and perfect every single note. You have to just be able to play.
Yeah, exactly. So
amazing.
And in Cleveland, in fact, a couple of times we were doing recordings, sight reading. So you had to just know the stuff.
Wow.
Because it had to be flawless for a recording. So yeah, it did happen. In Cleveland, I was there for 8 years, but my very first day was a tour.
Oh my gosh, where did you go?
We went to Los Angeles. There was a Hollywood Bowl California tour. Well, our first concert was a Hollywood Bowl. And I was so excited to be in this orchestra, and it was a distinguished orchestra. Part of that distinguished business was that it was older. There were not so many young people in the orchestra, so I felt like I was in an August crowd.
Yeah.
And they were all wonderful musicians, and still are. It's a wonderful orchestra still to this day.
Yeah.
And we flew out to Los Angeles. We had a rehearsal, and then the first concert, which I think was the Complete Firebird Ballet. And the Miraculous Mandarin and things like that. So
just a few.
Yeah, just a few. But after the intermission, I was on stage ready for the whole orchestra was there, ready to play the second half. And then I heard some pounding on the stage, footfalls, and it was, I don't know if you're acquainted with the term streaking.
Yes.
Yes. There's a gang of about 10 guys who came streaking across the stage. And when they came into my view, because I was in the front of the violin section, I thought,
oh my gosh.
This is a Cleveland Orchestra concert.
Welcome to my new life.
You gotta be kidding. My new life, yes. So,
oh my gosh.
And the only ones that had any presence of mind were the brass players who started squirting these guys with valve oil, so... So that was my first experience.
That's
with the Cleveland
amazing.
Orchestra,
That's amazing. And while you were there, was Mazel there the whole time?
He was, yeah. My last day was his last day. He was going to Vienna.
Really?
And I was going to Montreal.
Wow.
So I was there 8 years during his tenure there, and then I went to the Montreal Symphony.
Wow. And in Montreal, who was the music director when you got there?
Charles
Dutoit was there when you got there.
Yeah, when I got there. He hired me. In fact, he came as a guest conductor to Cleveland. And the concertmaster, Danny Majeski, was sick. So I was the concertmaster. So he had a chance to test me out in a real life situation as the leader of the orchestra. So so that's, we got along very well.
And there's a lot of recordings during those years.
Oh, yeah, lots. We used to do between 10 and 12 CDs every year.
Wow.
So
wow. And I feel like that doesn't happen anymore, that level of recording.
No.
Every once in a while something great gets put out, but nobody's doing the complete XYZ of whatever the works are.
Really, that's absolutely true.
I have so many of those Montreal.
You can name the orchestra, and the Berlin Philharmonic, New York Philharmonic, they're just not doing that same level of recording that we did in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah. Now I feel like it's more soloist driven in whatever the piece they're going to do, the album with the great orchestra is affiliated, but you don't hear the whole Rimsky-Korsakov or all the Ravel and all those things.
Exactly, yeah.
So that's such a magical time to be there during those. Was that experience, like you said, often you were doing sight reading, was it just the guys are in the booth and off we go?
Yeah, we had more time, which is unusual in recording sessions. We had time left, so they said, well, let's do this then. We'll add something to the pile of music that we were doing, so they would pull out an overture or something.
Wow. So they weren't like stopping and starting and punching in, and you just were going.
Just read through it.
Wow.
So
that's incredible.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Wow, amazing. Well, one question I'd love to ask you, I ask every person that I get to speak with, and I love the answers. One of the things I'm most interested in is those musical moments, the magical moments where the people performing and the people listening are all aware that it's an extra special time, that there's this thickness in the air and you can feel it. Can you tell us about a time where you were performing that you were present in that experience, or maybe in your travels and in your youth performance that you were at also, where you were able to see something and go, that's it?
Well, actually, you bring up an interesting thing, because I find that happening a lot in Bellingham, with the Bellingham Music Festival, because it's a smaller theater, and so we're closer to the audience. In fact, I sit
like 3
just
feet.
a few feet
Yeah.
in front of the front row of listeners. And so I find that they're more into what we're doing, and they feel more closely the vibe that's going on with the orchestra, because they can see the internal energy that's there in us. Whereas in a large place, I've played in auditoriums that were 3,000 people or 4,000 people, and it's more remote. And so the music gets kind of lost, or the energy of the music, the synergy of the musicians and the energy of the music gets lost. But here it's really
potent.
Find it. I think so.
Yeah, and you can really, as a player, you can really feel it when you have everyone's complete attention.
Oh, for sure.
And for them, I think I've had people comment and say, I could really see, or I could really watch the communication between different members of the group, or I could see the tension building between everyone. And I think that's something that's so valuable.
I think it's special, really special.
Is there a performer that you always looked up to, any instrument or someone that you really valued their musicality?
Oh, there's so many, really. That's a hard one. But I love the singers, because my great dream in life now, that I'm older, is to become a fabulous tenor. I know it's not going to happen. I can hardly sing. But
we can dream.
We sang with Pavarotti once. We played with Pavarotti. The great Russian cellist Rostropovich was unequaled, I think, in my lifetime. I heard a recital once of Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau that was fabulous, just fabulous from beginning to end, and I was mesmerized. So people like this, that I love their playing, I love their singing. I guess the ones I've mentioned, it was 2 out of 3 were singers. So this is my secret love, is opera and lieder and singing,
it gets
vocal.
to the core of humanity. And you really get to know the person because it's their own voice, and they're really out there on display. That's amazing. I would love to hear about your instrument. How, have you had it through a lot of your career? Do you switch often?
No, I don't switch. I don't switch at all. I've had this instrument since I was a senior at Indiana University. Wow. I bought it then before I graduated, and with the hopes that I would have a professional career, and if I show up to an audition, I had to bring a fine instrument with me. So I bought the best I could afford. I borrowed the money. It took me 14 years to pay for it. And it was made by a maker whose name was Francesco Gobetti. He was a student of Stradivari. And he lived in Venice. My instrument was made in 1702. Wow. And so it's really old, but it's in magnificent shape.
Do you know anything about its life?
They wouldn't, when I bought it in New York at the dealers was Rembert Wurlitzer. And this was in 1968. And they didn't tell me much about it, but I heard that one of the owners had killed himself. So they maybe didn't want to talk about it for fear that they might not sell it.
Exactly.
But I went to have it evaluated year before last in England at Charles Beer. And Charles, he said, I know your violin. And I said, what? But it's been in my possession since 1968. He said, yeah, I have the original sales before that, copies of the invoices.
Incredible.
From the 30s, 40s, 50s, and even before that, he had a history of it. So
that's incredible. That's
and
like
I saw
someone
my
telling
name
you
on
have
it.
A great grandma.
Yes, they saw my name was on it as being the latest buyer in 1968. So
that's fascinating.
so I was really amazed by that. So
how do you know when it came to the States?
Yeah. It was bought by actually one of the teachers at Indiana University, Daniel Guillet, bought it. And he used it for many years. He was played in the Beaux-Arts trio.
Wow.
And but I didn't know this.
That's
I didn't
incredible.
know this. He's not the guy that killed himself. He
Right.
was a wonderful violinist, and he was one of the people I looked up to at the
Playing
faculty
your
at
violin.
Indiana. But I didn't know. He had a Strat then. But
Yeah.
he had sold, by the time I knew him, he had
Yeah.
sold the Gobetti to somebody else.
Wow.
So, but there was a connection there too that I wasn't aware of when I was going to school.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And what about bows?
I have 2 English bows.
Is that
James
something that
Tubbs.
you keep
Yeah,
like through your whole life, or are you
Yeah.
always looking for a new bow? Or...
always looking. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm always looking. I'm going to buy a new one next week. Also, I buy a modern maker, and I bought one last year also by a
Cool.
modern maker. So I'm always experimenting, and it's not so terribly expensive
Right.
compared to buying a violin.
Right.
In fact, many violins are not purchased by musicians. They're purchased by banks or foundations
Right.
or
And then
just
have to go
wealthy
online.
donors who let musicians use the instruments, but
Mm-hmm.
they belong to the people or institution
Right.
that bought it. So
I feel like looking for a new violin, especially an old new violin, is such a daunting task. Is there specific dealers that pretty much everyone knows you can go to
Yeah.
these places, or
yeah.
where do you even start? Are you looking for color response, or when you're dealing with something that old?
Yeah, I just go and try out instruments. Well, I did when I bought this,
Mm-hmm.
when I went to 6 different cities. I went to dealers in Philadelphia, New York City, Chicago, Omaha, Minneapolis, another, I don't
Mm-hmm.
remember even where. But I ended up buying the first one that I tried from Wurlitzer in New York. That was the very first one I tried, and I just never was able to duplicate it. After that, it was so easy to play. So I bought
Amazing.
it. And
And it's been a partner in crime ever since.
yes, right.
Yeah, and that's
right.
incredible. And do you feel, if you try somebody else's violin, does it feel so foreign? Are
Yeah,
you-
yeah.
you're
It always takes time to get used to
Yeah.
any violin.
Yeah.
If I were, I went to Chicago a few years ago to try out a violin that was for sale for $18 million. Vieuxtemps, the composer, violin composer, had a violin that was Gornerius, and I wanted to try it. I flew to Chicago just to try this violin,
Totally.
and I spent a couple hours on it. And then the dealer, Jeff Fushi, said, "Come on back tomorrow, do it again." So I had 2 days with this violin, and I loved it. It was a magnificent instrument, but of course, I did not have $18 million yet. So,
We'll see.
yeah, we'll see.
See what we can get you.
Yeah, that's
Somebody's
right.
got to have it.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, I would love, before we have to wrap up, do you have any fun thoughts thinking through time of funny like bloopers or experiences? I always love that all of this stuff happens in rehearsals and getting ready and performances and guests, and the audience never knows, and then they pile in at the last second literally and plop down, and the show happens and everyone loves it and they leave. Meanwhile, the duress or the fun and craziness going on stage or things like that. Have you had somebody fill in last minute for a soloist or a change in conductor or something that just kind of frothed everybody up that's memorable to you?
Well, all of those things happen,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's unpredictable. There's probably one experience per season that happens that everybody remembers that's strange or out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
But I do remember one that I don't know that it was so funny, but it was unique. Mm-hmm. And we were playing a concert with the Cleveland Orchestra, and usually our intermissions are about 20 to 25 minutes long. So we had our intermission, and then we were called back. The personnel manager called everybody back to the stage for the second half of the concert, and everybody came out to the stage, and we were all seated, but we noticed that there was nobody left in the audience, not a soul, not one person. And they were out having a glass of wine or something in the lobby, and there was no mechanism to call them back into the hall, so everybody was just hobnobbing. And so when the audience finally did come out, we applauded them, so So
They
it was a
didn't have
little
the beep or the
reverse. Yes,
lights.
So we had a little reversal of roles.
Oh, that's hysterical.
So,
That's hysterical. And now there's so many built-in kind of faculties to how the whole thing goes. And
Yes,
I feel like there's a part of that. I've been talking with people about, especially my age. I feel like the 25 to 40 age bracket is the least in touch with classical music in daily life. Not musicians, non-musicians.
Non-musicians.
And there's so much, not formality is the wrong word, but there's so many steps to the experience of the symphony. And there's the before, and then you can go to the bar, and then you do this, and then you don't clap, and then you do clap, and then the lights go on, and then they tune. And for whatever reason, in the people that I've spoken to, they find it really intimidating, and they won't come because they're afraid they're going to misstep. And so it's funny because all those things slowly happened. At first, no one would call them back from the bar, and then they decided to start flickering the lights or sound the tone, and
signal
now there's
sort.
giant bowls of throat lozenges everywhere, so no one coughs, and there's so much to it which we don't think about because it's all just part of life, but to someone coming into the experience with no information, they feel really intimidated by that. So I think that's something that's interesting to try and get people over. Now, we're doing the student passes and college cards and all this and getting kids involved, and you can wear jeans and all of that. But I feel like there's so many funny little isms to the concert experience.
I think so too. And there are things that have built up over the years, but even so, I don't mind it. Like one of the traditions is you don't clap between movements, which is so unlike other types of music where you can clap after every song or even during the song if there's a interesting solo or something like that. But I don't mind this when people clap between movements. They appreciate it. In fact, when I was a young person, I was a concert goer, I was a listener. I felt like it too. I felt like
you're like, oh, that was awesome.
Applauding.
Oh my God.
That was fantastic. I loved it.
Yeah.
So this doesn't bother me a bit. And I think we're finding a lot more young people coming to concerts nowadays, at least in Montreal, than were, say, 20 years ago. You might be right about that demographic.
We're kind of the lost generation. The teens now and the new college students are more into it. But
I think it's coming back. In a way,
very exciting.
Concert experience is changing, programming is changing, but then I look back at old programs. I mean, old programs like in Beethoven's time, and I have a copy of a program from one of Beethoven's concerts that he conducted and played, and it was monstrous. I mean, the length, hours, And the Beethoven Violin Concerto, along with 2 piano concertos, the Sixth Symphony, some arias even, and then at intermission, one of the violinists entertained the audience with his violin doing barnyard sounds. So, I mean, it's all kinds of weird things that used to be that no longer exists.
Right.
So
we keep it to like an hour and 58 minutes.
Basics,
Keep it right in there.
Between 77 and 80 minutes is our concert length with the intermission. So that's it's proscribed pretty much.
Yeah, and that's very interesting just over time. But I mean, at that time, that was the only music they were going to hear, and they probably, saved up and waited, and it was the only entertainment there was. Yeah. So they wanted to hear the symphony a second time later the same day, and get it in their ears.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, it's so fantastic. Well, thank you so much for chatting with us and sharing your experiences. They're so valuable to everyone.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Inside the Notes. I'm your host, Erica Block. Be sure to check the Inside the Notes Facebook page for details on our next guest.